So I think we usually think of modern medicine like it is this incredibly secure, almost impenetrable fortress.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely do.
Right. Like we have the high walls of sanitation, we have these vigilant guards of diagnostic testing, and most importantly, we have the heavy artillery.
The antibiotics.
Exactly, the big guns. So if a breach happens, say a bacterial infection slips past those outer defenses, we just assume we can call in the heavy artillery. Boom.
Yeah, the threat is neutralized.
Right. The patient recovers, and we all just go back to our lives feeling perfectly safe.
It is a profoundly comforting illusion, and we have lived with this idea for nearly a century now.
Wow, a century.
Yeah, this underlying assumption that we possess an endless, infinite stockpile of these magic bullets. I mean, the entire structure of modern life, from minor surgeries to global travel, it all relies entirely on the premise that if we get sick, there will always be a pill to fix it.
But then, you sit down and you start looking through this massive stack of sources we have for today's deep dive, and suddenly that fortress looks like it is made of paper.
It really does.
Because what becomes terrifyingly clear is that we are quietly, almost silently, running out of ammunition.
The armory is almost empty. Creeping catastrophe is the phrase that comes to mind here.
Creepy catastrophe, yeah.
Because it isn't a sudden explosion, right? It is the slow, methodical dismantling of our primary defense mechanism against the microscopic world.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack an incredibly multifaceted stack of documents concerning what might actually be, well, the single greatest threat to human survival in the 21st century.
Which is the escalating global crisis of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Right, AMR.
Yeah.
And looking at the math presented in these documents, the forecast is just staggering.
It is grim.
We're looking at a trajectory where drug-resistant superbugs could kill up to 39 million people between now and 2050.
And, 39 million is a number so large it almost defies human comprehension.
Yeah, it just becomes an abstraction at that point.
Exactly. But we really have to ground that number in reality. Every single digit in that statistic represents a person who, well, they went to a clinic or a hospital expecting a routine cure.
Like for a urinary tract infection or a scraped knee.
Right, or a post-surgical complication, and they didn't get a cure because the medicine simply failed.
What makes today's material so fascinating to me, though, is the sheer contrast in the sources we are looking at.
Oh, the juxtaposition is wild.
It really is. On one side of the desk, we have these incredibly dry, highly technical reports from the World Health Organization, the quadripartite and international funding bodies.
Right, all these massive bureaucratic frameworks trying to track the data from the top down.
Yeah, exactly. And then, sitting right next to those reports, we have the deeply personal, intensely philosophical manifestos of a veteran physician named Dr. Kadiali Srivatsa.
Which is such a shift in tone.
It is. We are looking at dry global policy data sitting right alongside ancient Sanskrit concepts of cosmic law, karma, and these really bold claims about civilizational responsibility.
It is truly one of the most remarkable syntheses of information we have ever covered.
So true.
And to help you, the listener, navigate this journey today, we are going to follow a very deliberate roadmap.
Okay, let's lay it out.
First, we need to understand the systemic structural failures that are biologically driving the superbug crisis. Because, it isn't just bad luck.
Right.
It is a systemic error in how we actually practice medicine. Second, we will explore the massive multi-billion-dollar international frameworks desperately trying to track this invisible enemy.
They're basically trying to build a global radar system, right?
Exactly. And third, and this is where the material takes a truly radical turn, we are going to zoom in on a highly specific solar-powered AI technology from India.
This part blew my mind.
It is fascinating. It is a system designed to completely upend the economic hoarding of the healthcare industry and put the power of medical triage directly into the hands of local communities.
And the reason you need to care about this, the reason this matters to you, sitting in your car or walking your dog right now, is because the era of casually popping an antibiotic for a lingering cough is ending.
The safety net is fraying.
It really is. Understanding this global shift and the tools emerging to help us navigate it is quite literally a matter of survival. So let's start with the enemy itself. What exactly is happening on a biological level, and why is our radar for tracking it fundamentally broken?
Let's ground ourselves in the actual mechanics of antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, let's do that.
So AMR occurs when pathogens, whether they are bacteria, viruses, fungi, or parasites, they evolve over time and they simply stop responding to the medicines we use to treat them.
Because they mutate.
Right. They mutate. They develop new armor or new ways to neutralize the drug entirely. And the data from our sources puts a terrifying scale to this.
Tell me about it.
A major report on English surveillance notes that in 2021 alone, an estimated 4.71 million deaths were associated with bacterial AMR globally.
Over 4.5 million deaths in a single year. I mean, that is pandemic-level mortality.
It absolutely is.
But it is happening so quietly. It is just scattered across ICUs and wards around the world, just diffused enough that it doesn't trigger the daily front-page panic of a novel virus.
And the data highlights a critical, often ignored nuance here. This invisible enemy acts as a massive magnifying glass for existing social inequalities.
Wait, really?
Yes, it does not hit every demographic equally. If we look closely at the data from England, the rate of resistant bloodstream infections is 47% higher in the most deprived areas compared to the least deprived areas.
Wow, 47%.
And furthermore, that gap has widened by 18% since 2019.
Okay, I am trying to wrap my head around the mechanism there. Why does poverty make a bacteria more resistant? I mean, a microscopic organism doesn't know your income bracket or your zip code.
Well, the bacteria doesn't know your income, no. But poverty dictates the environment the bacteria lives in.
Oh, I see.
It dictates how easily it spreads and, critically, how it is treated. In more deprived areas, you frequently see overcrowded living conditions, which just accelerates transmission rates.
That makes sense.
You also see lower access to high-quality nutrition, which suppresses immune responses. But the most significant factor is the disparity in healthcare access and the quality of diagnostics available to those populations.
Right.
And this leads us to the core clinical behavior that is actually accelerating AMR globally. It is a systemic failure known as empirical treatment.
I saw that phrase, empirical treatment, over and over in the medical literature. What is the actual reality of that practice on the ground?
Well, in a perfect, idealized medical world, a patient comes in with an infection, and the doctor takes a sample, like blood, urine, or a swab.
Stands.
Right. They send it to a laboratory where technicians culture the bacteria, grow it in a petri dish, and introduce different antibiotics to see exactly which one kills it. Then they prescribe that specific targeted drug.
But I am guessing that isn't what usually happens?
No, because in reality, that process takes 48 to 72 hours.
That is a long time to wait if you were really sick.
Exactly. And it requires expensive, highly calibrated laboratory infrastructure. So instead of waiting 3 days while a patient suffers or potentially deteriorates, the doctor engages in empirical treatment.
They just guess.
They make an educated guess based on the symptoms, and they prescribe a broad-spectrum antibiotic right there on the spot, hoping it covers whatever is causing the infection.
Okay, let's unpack this. They're essentially carpet bombing the patient's internal ecosystem.
It is the biological equivalent of dropping a massive explosive on a city to eliminate a handful of criminals. I mean, you might eliminate the threat, sure, but the collateral damage is catastrophic. In the human microbiome, these broad-spectrum antibiotics wipe out massive populations of beneficial bacteria.
The good stuff we actually need.
Right. But here is the evolutionary catch. Whatever few pathogens naturally survive that carpet bombing, well, those are the ones with the genetic mutations that grant them resistance.
Because you've cleared out all their competition.
Exactly. They survive, they multiply, they share their resistant genetic material with other bacteria, and suddenly you have birthed a superbug.
Wow. So if this blind carpet bombing is the engine creating superbugs, and it is this dangerous, I am struggling to understand why we don't take a more proactive approach.
What do you mean?
Like, why don't we just test healthy people? Take a swab from a random sample of the population to see where the resistance is building up before it turns into a massive lethal infection.
It seems like the obvious solution, I know. But the sources repeatedly highlight a massive limitation in microbiology. You cannot proactively test a healthy population for AMR in the way you might screen a population for high cholesterol or elevated blood pressure.
Really? Why not?
Because AMR can only be definitively tested in organisms that are actively causing an infection. Resistance is identified by isolating the specific bacteria that are rapidly multiplying and causing disease in a host at that exact moment.
Wait, so I can't just go to my doctor, get a blood test, and find out if I am carrying an antibiotic-resistant bug?
Not with any reliable predictive value, no. The human body is a walking ecosystem. We are full of trillions of bacteria at any given moment.
That's true.
So identifying the single specific microscopic organism that might, at some unknown point in the future, decide to cross the barrier and cause a pathogenic infection, and then trying to test its resistance profile beforehand, well, it is an impossible task.
Finding a needle in a haystack.
It is like trying to find a needle in a haystack made entirely of other slightly different needles.
Oh, wow. That is a great way to put it.
Because of this biological reality, we are entirely dependent on tracking sick people. We have to wait until a human being is actively suffering from a clinical infection to isolate and test the bacteria.
We are fighting a war completely blindfolded. We literally have to wait for the enemy to strike and cause casualties before we even know what weapons they are immune to.
Which is exactly why the current state of global surveillance is so terrifying to public health officials. We are fundamentally reactive.
And if our local individual radar is that delayed and reactive, how do we possibly track this on a planetary scale?
It is a massive challenge.
Because a superbug born in a clinic in one city today can board an international flight and be on another continent tomorrow. The borders are imaginary to a bacteria.
That specific terror is what finally mobilized global health authorities a decade ago. It catalyzed the creation of massive international frameworks designed to build a unified global radar system.
Right.
The cornerstone of all this bureaucracy is something called the 2015 Global Action Plan on AMR, usually referred to as the GAP.
The sources mentioned the GAP was adopted by the World Health Assembly, right?
Yes.
And it basically told every country they had to come up with their own homework assignments, these national action plans.
Exactly.
But the conceptual shift that seemed to dominate all the documents was this phrase: One Health.
One Health is the absolute foundation of understanding how AMR actually works in the real world.
How so?
It is the belated realization by the scientific community that you cannot separate human health from animal health or from environmental health.
And they're all connected.
They do not exist in vacuums. They are a single, continuous, closed loop. For decades, human doctors operated in a strict silo, veterinarians operated in their own silo, and environmental scientists focused purely on soil and water.
Reading about this made me think of a submarine.
A submarine.
Yeah, imagine you're in a massive submarine and there is a catastrophic leak. The engineers in the human living quarters are frantically trying to fix the plumbing in the bathrooms, taping up pipes and replacing valves. But they are completely ignoring the fact that the actual steel hull of the submarine has been breached in the cargo bay where they keep the livestock. You can't just fix the plumbing in the human section and expect the submarine to stop taking on water. The water flows everywhere.
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic failure of the 20th century.
Thank you.
And the size of the breach in the cargo bay of animal health is almost unbelievable. Let's look at the specific data points from the agricultural reports. 73% of the world's antibiotics are used in livestock.
That statistic just stopped me in my tracks. 73%.
It is wild.
Almost 3/4 of all the antibiotics produced on planet Earth are not going into the bodies of sick humans. They are going to farm animals. Are the animals that sick?
No, they are not, and that is the tragedy of modern agriculture. In many parts of the world, these antibiotics are not used therapeutically to treat sick animals at all.
Then what are they used for?
They are used for non-therapeutic purposes, specifically for growth promotion.
I read that, and I honestly couldn't parse the biology. How does feeding an antibiotic to a pig or a chicken make it grow faster or get fatter?
It comes down to manipulating the gut microbiome and the animal's immune response.
Okay, walk me through that.
When livestock are fed low, continuous, subtherapeutic doses of antibiotics, it fundamentally alters the flora in their digestive tract. It actually thins the mucosal lining of the intestines.
Interesting.
In a normal animal, the immune system spends a lot of metabolic energy maintaining that gut lining and fighting off minor everyday bacteria. By suppressing that bacterial load with constant drugs, the animal doesn't have to expend that energy.
Ah, I see.
Furthermore, the thinned intestinal wall allows the animal to absorb more nutrients, more calories, directly from their feed. They grow larger, and they reach slaughter weight much faster.
So it is purely an economic hack.
A highly profitable one in an industry with razor-thin margins. But biologically, feeding subtherapeutic doses of antibiotics is the absolute perfect recipe for breeding superbugs.
Because they aren't dying.
Right. You aren't giving the animal enough of the drug to actually kill a bacterial population. You are just introducing enough of the drug to stress the bacteria, applying constant evolutionary pressure.
So the bacteria are forced to mutate just to survive.
Yes, they mutate, survive, and share their resistance genes with each other just to exist in that gut environment.
So let's trace the path here. We feed these subtherapeutic drugs to a pig to make it grow faster. The bacteria in the pig's gut mutates to survive the constant chemical stress.
Yeah.
Now, the pig is basically a factory for superbugs.
Exactly.
How does that leap from the pig to a human being who has maybe never even been to that farm?
The pathways are incredibly porous. I mean, if the meat isn't processed with perfect hygiene or cooked to an exact temperature, the resistant bacteria can be transmitted directly to the consumer.
That is terrifying.
But it goes far beyond meat consumption. Even if you are a strict, lifelong vegetarian, you are deeply entangled in this loop.
Wait, really?
The animal waste. Millions of tons of manure are absolutely loaded with these resistant bacteria. That waste is spread on fields as fertilizer. It enters the soil.
Oh, no.
When it rains, the runoff carries those superbugs into the local water supply, into streams and rivers. The crops absorb the contaminated water. Humans consume the crops or drink the water or swim in the lakes.
It's a completely interconnected planetary cycle.
The submarine is filling with water from the cargo bay.
To combat this massive leak, the documents outline these sprawling databases being built, right?
Massive international data silos. You have the WHO building GLAS, which stands for the Global Antimicrobial Resistance and Use Surveillance System. That one is dedicated to human data.
Okay, GLS for humans.
Then you have the World Organization for Animal Health building Animus to track what the farmers are doing.
Animus, got it.
And you have the FAO building Infarm. The ultimate goal of the One Health mandate is to somehow integrate all these disparate data streams to spot the trends before they become lethal outbreaks.
I look at these massive acronyms and databases, and I have to ask, how does a policymaker or a politician actually use a database to stop a superbug? Like, practically speaking, what does victory look like?
Well, the sources offer a very clear success story, actually, the Netherlands.
Oh, the Netherlands?
Yeah, the Netherlands has one of the lowest rates of antibiotic resistance in the entire world. And it wasn't an accident of geography, it was a deliberate systemic policy choice.
What did they do?
They used robust surveillance data to enforce incredibly strict antibiotic stewardship. They banned the use of antibiotics for growth promotion in livestock long before the rest of Europe did.
That is huge.
They also implemented draconian infection prevention controls in their hospitals. If you were transferred to a Dutch hospital from a foreign hospital, you are placed in strict isolation until they prove you aren't carrying a superbug.
They literally took the data and built physical walls with it.
But they went a step further into the economics. They aligned their national insurance policies.
How so?
Dutch health insurance heavily covers preventative measures, vaccinations, and comprehensive infection control initiatives. By designing a system that prevents the infection from occurring in the first place, they drastically reduce the overall need for a doctor to ever prescribe an antibiotic.
They fixed the plumbing, they patched the hull, and they paid the engineers to maintain it.
Exactly.
It sounds like a perfect model. But as I kept reading, I hit the glaring flaw in all these global database plans. A database, no matter how advanced, is only as good as the raw data you feed into it.
Right.
And what happens when half the planet simply does not have the physical or economic infrastructure to collect that data?
This is where the global ambition hits the brutal reality of the global south. The case study of the Netherlands represents the absolute pinnacle of well-funded, pristine laboratory environments.
Yeah, not everywhere looks like that.
Exactly. The sources point out that the global need for data is severely crippled by a massive lack of laboratory infrastructure in low and middle-income countries, frequently referred to as LMICs in the literature.
I was reading about the efforts to fix this, specifically a UK government initiative called the Fleming Fund, which ran from roughly 2018 to 2022.
Yes.
They were pouring grants into these countries to try to build surveillance systems from scratch. And they relied on this framework called the LSHTM Roadmap, developed by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.
The LSHTM roadmap is fascinating because it acknowledges the sheer logistical nightmare of basic surveillance. We sit in highly developed nations and think, well, if they need data, just ship them a diagnostic machine.
Right, just plug it in.
But you cannot just drop an advanced automated blood culture analyzer into a rural, underfunded clinic in sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia and expect it to work.
Because the machine is just the tip of the iceberg.
The machine is useless without the ecosystem around it.
What else do they need?
To run even basic bacteriology, you need consistent, uninterrupted electricity to keep the incubators at exact, unvarying temperatures for days at a time. A rolling blackout ruins the culture entirely.
Wow, I didn't even think of that.
You need clean, treated running water. You need rigorous biosafety standards and ventilation so the lab technicians don't accidentally inhale the pathogen and infect themselves or their community.
Of course.
You need robust, refrigerated supply chains for highly specific chemical regions and Petri dishes. And above all, you need a highly trained, educated workforce capable of interpreting complex blood cultures and identifying the exact species of bacteria.
The LSHTM roadmap seems to treat this as a multi-generational project. It outlines how a country can slowly crawl from core capabilities, which is just basic sample collection and rudimentary testing,
Right.
up to extended capabilities, and maybe one day reach advanced surveillance, which includes cutting-edge stuff like whole genome sequencing to track exact transmission routes.
It is a grueling step-by-step marathon, and it highlights a terrifying catch-22.
What is that?
The populations that are most intensely vulnerable to AMR, areas with high poverty, lack of sanitation, overcrowded living conditions, poor access to clean water, well, those are the exact locations that have the absolute least capacity to track the superbugs they are actively incubating.
It is a blind spot the size of half the planet. And looking at the geopolitical implications, the West cannot just look at this massive blind spot and say, well, that's a tragic humanitarian issue for them, but we are safe in our fortress.
Self-preservation makes that impossible.
Right.
In economic theory, there is a concept called a global public good. It is a resource that is non-excludable and non-rivalrous, meaning everyone benefits from it and no one can be stopped from using it.
Okay.
AMR surveillance data is the ultimate global public good. If a highly lethal, entirely drug-resistant superbug mutates in an underfunded, unmonitored clinic in a developing nation, it does not respect the national border.
Bacteria don't need passports.
Exactly. In our deeply interconnected world of global travel, trade, and tourism, that superbug will be in the airport terminal within hours, and it will be in London, New York, or Tokyo within days.
So the Fleming Fund wasn't just an act of charity. It was a defense budget. The West has to fund the Global South's surveillance out of pure self-interest.
Without that global radar, the West's pristine hospitals are just waiting to be overrun by a threat they can't see coming.
We have spent the first part of this deep dive looking at these massive top-down approaches. We have the WHO, the Quadripartite, the Fleming Fund, all trying to mandate databases, train lab technicians, and pour millions of dollars into infrastructure.
It is clearly necessary work.
It is. But reading through these documents, you get the distinct, heavy impression that all this top-down bureaucracy moves at the speed of, well, bureaucracy.
It is glacial. It involves endless committee meetings, funding approvals, and diplomatic negotiations. Meanwhile, the biological clock is ticking relentlessly. A bacteria can multiply and pass on a resistance gene every 20 minutes. Bureaucracies hold a summit every quarter.
And this is exactly where the source material takes a wildly fascinating, radical pivot.
It really does.
We transition away from the marble halls of Geneva and the international organizations, and we pivot directly toward the grassroots. We meet a man named Dr. Kadyali Srivatsa.
Often referred to in the documents as Dr. Shri.
Dr. Shri. He is a veteran physician with a 50-year medical career. He spent time working in rural India, seeing the ground-level realities of poverty, and then spent 15 years as a consultant in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS.
So he has experienced the peak of Western medical bureaucracy, too.
Exactly. And his contribution to this stack of documents is completely jarring compared to the WHO reports.
Oh, completely.
He didn't write a dry policy brief. He wrote a deeply philosophical manifesto combined with a highly advanced, AI-driven business plan.
It is a synthesis of ancient thought and futuristic technology. Dr. Srivatsa is the creator of what is called the Dr. Maya AI healthcare ecosystem.
And his documents make it aggressively clear that he does not view this project as a Silicon Valley tech startup.
Not at all.
I want to read a direct quote from his brief because the tone really sets the stage for the rest of our discussion.
Go for it.
He writes, "I want to be clear about what Dr. Maya is and what it is not. It is not a startup seeking investment to achieve evaluation. It is not a product seeking market share. It is a response to a civilizational crisis that I identified decades before it entered mainstream discourse, built by someone who has paid personally for the courage to say what needed to be said in institutions that did not want to hear it.
He positions his entire life's work as a civilizational response.
Those are heavy words.
They are. To grasp why he uses that specific language, we have to explore the profound philosophical and historical foundation of his work. The sources detail his ancestral lineage, which traces back to the Karyali Upadhyaya Brahmin lineage.
Okay.
His ancestors served as scholarly advisors to the Sringeriya Matha since the year 1400 CE.
The text also mentioned a connection to the Uluru Kartikeya temple.
Yes, where the deity Kartikeya serves dual roles as the divine physician and the demon slayer. The manifestos frame Dr. Srivatsa's modern technological development not as a quest for patents or wealth, but as a continuation of this ancient duty.
Wow.
He views it as a fulfillment of his ancestral dharma.
I have to admit, when I first read that, I was highly skeptical. I found myself thinking, how on earth does ancient Sanskrit philosophy translate into fighting antibiotic-resistant superbugs in the 21st century?
That sounds a bit abstract.
It sounds poetic, maybe even romantic, but how does it work practically? What is the bridge between cosmic law and a petri dish?
It requires looking at the crisis through a completely different lens. Dr. Srivatsa argues that the root cause of AMR is not merely a biological mutation.
It isn't.
The biological mutation is just a symptom. The actual root cause is a spiritual and systemic error in how human society operates. He frames it as a conflict between a mindset of hoarding and the concept of dharma.
When he talks about hoarding, is he talking about billionaires hoarding wealth? Because the texts hint at economic disparity.
He encompasses wealth, but he goes much deeper into hoarding knowledge and hoarding power.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In his view, the modern medical system, which is heavily influenced by corporate management, private equity, and administrative profit targets, it treats the patient purely as a profit source. The system is designed to create dependency.
How does it create dependency?
The medical institution hoards the knowledge. They use complex jargon, they gatekeep the diagnostics, and they leave the patient feeling ignorant, fearful, and entirely dependent on the institution for every minor symptom or ache.
So the patient is conditioned to run to the clinic in a panic, pay the fees, and demand a quick fix.
Exactly. And the system, to keep the throughput high, to keep the customer satisfied and the reviews positive, hands out broad-spectrum antibiotics like candy.
Which breeds the superbugs.
Yes. That cycle of manufactured dependency in fast food medicine is what drives AMR. Dharma, in stark contrast, is about protecting the cosmic order by empowering the individual to govern themselves.
There is a really vivid, somewhat controversial story in the sources that illustrates this difference between dependency and empowerment.
The charity event story.
Yes, Dr. Srivatsa contrasts the concept of charity with dharma. He recounts witnessing a grand charity event where wealthy donors and politicians were being honored with trophies on stage because they were handing out free school uniforms and school bags to impoverished children.
A classic, highly visible philanthropic photo op.
Right. But the narrative points out that the moment the free items were distributed and the free lunch was eaten, the hall emptied out instantly.
Naturally.
The people weren't there to learn a skill or build a school or solve the systemic reasons they couldn't afford clothes. They had been trained to be passive, dependent recipients of a handout. Dr. Srivatsa goes so far as to call this form of charity dharma, essentially bad karma.
He argues that this kind of transactional charity accumulates systemic negative karma because it actively conquers free will.
Conquers free will.
Yes. It keeps the impoverished population subservient to the wealthy donor. True dharmic service, in his framework, is giving people the tools and knowledge to survive without you. It makes the donor obsolete.
I really wrestled with this part of the manifesto. I found myself pushing back on his conclusion.
How come?
I mean, look, if a kid is freezing and needs a uniform to attend school, handing them a free uniform isn't some sinister act of subjugation. It is a necessary intervention. It feels incredibly harsh to call that bad karma.
It is a provocative stance, sure,
Ah,
but his critique isn't about denying emergency relief. It is about systemic design.
okay.
If your entire model of helping the poor relies on them remaining poor so you can keep handing them uniforms and taking photos, you haven't solved the problem. You have commodified their poverty.
Ah, I see the distinction.
Translating this to healthcare, if a medical system's entire business model relies on patients remaining ignorant about their own bodies so they keep coming back to buy treatments for preventable illnesses, that system is extractive.
That makes total sense.
Dharmic service in medicine means giving the patient the knowledge to understand their own physiology, what he calls body literacy.
Body literacy.
Right. If a patient understands their body, they don't rush to a profit-driven hospital in a blind panic over a minor viral sniffle.
The philosophical challenge he sets up is immense, though. How do you mathematically, technologically build a system that dismantles this institutional hoarding of medical knowledge?
It is a huge undertaking.
How do you scale this body literacy to billions of people across different languages and cultures, specifically to stop them from demanding the unnecessary antibiotics that are breeding superbugs?
His tangible technological answer to that massive philosophical question is the Prima kiosk.
Let's transition into the hardware, because this is where the philosophy meets the dirt road. PRIMA is an acronym that stands for Personal, Resourceful, Empowering Medical Advice.
The name is also deeply personal. The sources note it is an homage to his mother, as the word prima in Sanskrit translates to unconditional love.
It is a beautiful touch to a machine that sounds like something out of a near-future science fiction novel. The documents describe a standalone, solar-powered triage terminal.
Yes.
It is driven by the Dr. Maya AI, and crucially, it operates via a voice interface in over 30 languages.
The voice interface and the vast language capabilities are not just cool tech features, they are the core of its democratizing power.
Why is that so crucial?
Because the system is explicitly designed to bypass the traditional barriers of text literacy and English proficiency. It is built for the estimated 760 million individuals in India without smartphones, or the rural populations across the global south that centralized institutions have historically abandoned because they aren't profitable to serve.
I am trying to visualize how a person actually interacts with this system. Let's say I am a patient living in a rural village and I wake up feeling terrible. What happens?
You walk up to the Prima kiosk, which might be located at a local pharmacy or a community center. You don't need to type or navigate complex menus. You simply speak your symptoms in your native dialect.
Just talk to it.
Exactly. The AI listens, processes the language, and begins asking clarifying questions based on a massive synthesized dataset of clinical reasoning. It performs a triage interview, but it deliberately bypasses the traditional black box algorithm of modern tech monopoly.
The black box being the AI that just spits out an answer, and neither the patient nor the doctor has any idea how the computer arrived at that conclusion.
Precisely. Dr. Srivatsa designed Prima to use entirely transparent combinatorial logic. The patient can see exactly how the decision was made.
How did they see that?
The output relies on a beautifully simple universal four-color triage code: red, yellow, green, and blue.
Let's walk through those codes because they dictate the entire flow of the system. Red seems self-explanatory.
Red means immediate life-threatening danger. The AI recognizes stroke symptoms or severe cardiac distress and tells you to get to a hospital or seek emergency transport right now.
Okay, what about yellow?
Yellow indicates caution. The AI has detected symptoms that require a doctor's consultation soon, which might be facilitated via a telemedicine link directly integrated to the kiosk.
Got it. And green.
Green is the code of reassurance. Green means you have a self-limiting viral cold or a minor ailment. The AI tells you to go home, rest, drink fluids, and explicitly states you do not need antibiotics.
We will hold off on the blue code for a moment because that plays into the global surveillance piece.
Right.
But focusing just on the green code, this is where the body literacy happens.
Yeah.
The AI doesn't just say go home, it explains why the symptoms don't require heavy medication.
Exactly.
It separates genuine medical emergencies from minor illnesses, attacking the root fear that drives people to demand antibiotics.
And while it empowers the patient, it simultaneously tackles the massive burnout crisis happening on the physician side of the equation.
The doctors are burning out too.
Oh, severely.
Yeah.
The sources are absolutely scathing about the administrative burden crushing doctors, particularly highlighting Dr. Srivatsa's experience in the UK's NHS.
What does he say about it?
He writes about doctors being reduced to data entry clerks, forced into 10-minute appointment slots, answering to administrators with business degrees, and spending hours mindlessly clicking through electronic health records instead of practicing medicine.
He calls it healthcare destruction disguised as modernization. It is a brutal critique of how we have industrialized the doctor-patient relationship.
The PRIMA system is engineered to reverse this dynamic entirely.
How?
The AI serves the doctor, not the hospital administrator. Before the doctor even speaks to the patient, the AI has completed the triage, prioritized the urgent cases based on the color codes, and pre-populated a clean, clinical summary of the symptoms.
So the doctor doesn't have to do all that data entry.
Exactly. The pilot data included in the sources is striking. NHS doctors using this AI system reduce their daily administrative time from 3.2 hours down to 1.1 hours.
It gives them back 2 hours a day to actually look the patient in the eye and think critically.
Yep.
But the implications go way beyond clinical efficiency. The PRIMA system radically changes the economic model of healthcare delivery. It is designed specifically as an anti-hoarding business model.
This is where we look at the micro-franchise concept.
Right.
Instead of a massive, centralized corporate hospital system building a fortress and extracting wealth from sick people who travel from villages, the PRIMA kiosk is deployed directly into marginalized communities. And it is operated by a local franchisee known as a Maya advocate.
And the texts specify that these advocates are preferentially local women.
Yes, often members of local self-help groups or women transitioning out of domestic labor.
Wait, but they aren't doctors.
They do not need formal medical qualifications because the AI is shouldering the burden of the clinical triage decisions. The human advocate is there to provide the vital human touch.
To guide them through it.
Right. To help an elderly or nervous user navigate the voice interface, to maintain the hardware, to keep the solar panels clean, and to manage the queue.
And the cost to the patient using the kiosk is 100 rupees, which translates to roughly the price of a cup of coffee. It is a micro fee.
It is affordable, but the genius is in how the revenue is distributed. The wealth is not siphoned off to a corporate headquarters.
How is it split?
The fee is split down the middle. 50% goes to the Dr. Maya Foundation to maintain the global servers and update the AI, and 50% stays directly with the local advocate and franchisee.
The wealth stays localized.
Completely localized.
The sources highlight a highly specific moving case study about this. They detail a woman who was previously working as a domestic cleaner, sweeping floors and washing dishes, earning perhaps 10,000 rupees a month.
Yeah.
She became a Maya advocate, learned to operate the system, eventually expanded to running 3 kiosks in her area, and is now earning 1.2 lakh monthly.
That is a 12-fold increase in her income.
It is incredible. She is using that money to send her daughter to medical school.
As Dr. Srivatsan notes in the documents, that's not a job, that's generational transformation. It elevates these women from unseen domestic labor to respected, vital community health leaders.
I'm trying to find a metaphor to explain the systemic impact of this kiosk to someone who hasn't read the papers, and I kept coming back to the airport.
The airport?
Yeah, think about the security screen in a major airport.
Yeah.
You don't let 1,000 people walk onto the airplanes, take off, and then try to check their bags mid-flight. That would be chaos.
Right, that wouldn't work.
You create a choke point at the perimeter. The PRIMA kiosk acts as that security screen. It is an objective, tireless, unbribable triage nurse sitting at the absolute perimeter of the healthcare system.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. It acts as a filter. It keeps the contagious, non-critical people out of the crowded hospital waiting rooms.
Which is so important.
If someone has a highly infectious, potentially drug-resistant respiratory bug, the absolute worst place for them to be is sitting in a crowded emergency room for 4 hours, coughing on immunocompromised patients who are there for chemotherapy.
Oh, absolutely.
The PRIMA kiosk halts that transmission chain upstream. It tells the infectious patient to isolate at home or routes them safely away from vulnerable populations.
But this decentralized model immediately raises a massive red flag for me regarding quality assurance.
What is your concern?
We are empowering local, non-medically trained individuals to run health kiosks. What stops a local operator from going rogue?
Going rogue how?
What stops them from saying, hey, I know the computer gave you a green code and said go home, but I happen to have some leftover antibiotics in my purse, and I'll sell them to you for an extra 50 rupees. How do you stop them from playing doctor and causing harm?
That is the single greatest risk in any decentralized health model, honestly. And the documents address it head on with a mechanism called the liability shield and a rigorous automated audit protocol.
I am curious how they enforce that in a village hundreds of miles from a city.
Because every interaction at the kiosk is run through the AI voice interface, the
Yeah.
AI is constantly listening.
It hears everything.
It generates a continuous anonymized text transcript of the human-to-human interaction happening between the advocate and the patient. It acts as a built-in real-time quality assurance monitor.
So it is monitoring the operator.
Yes. If the AI detects specific pre-programmed red line keywords, for instance, if the operator contradicts the AI's color code, or if the operator tries to name a specific drug or attempts to prescribe a medication, the AI instantly flags the interaction.
It is an automated auditor that never sleeps.
Correct. Minor deviations trigger automated corrective retraining modules for the advocate right there on their screen.
And major ones.
Critical violations, like unauthorized prescribing or dispensing drugs, immediately escalate the audio file to a central human compliance team. That team has the power to lock down the kiosk remotely and revoke the franchise entirely.
Wow, they can just shut it off.
It strictly algorithmically enforces the boundary between technological facilitation and unauthorized medical practice.
It protects the patient from bad advice, it protects the foundation from massive liability, and it keeps the entire ecosystem pure.
Exactly.
So we have seen how a single Prima kiosk empowers the individual with body literacy and how it empowers the local economy by keeping wealth in the village. But the true scale of Dr. Srivasta's vision only becomes clear when you link thousands of these localized kiosks together.
When you network them, you achieve what public health officials have considered the holy grail of epidemiology. And this brings us to the mysterious blue code we mentioned earlier.
The Epidemic Defense Network. Reading this section of the documents felt like reading a techno-thriller. I want to understand how the data flows from a single person coughing at a kiosk in a village to a global map in Geneva.
Every single time a person interacts with a Prima kiosk, the AI generates symptom data. It completely strips away the user's name, identity, and personal details to maintain privacy, but it logs the specific symptoms, the exact time, and the precise geographic location.
Okay.
All of this anonymized data continuously feeds into a central, global, real-time monitoring network. The AI is constantly hunting for anomalies and patterns across millions of data points.
To understand why this is revolutionary, we have to contrast it with how we currently operate. How does the WHO or a national health agency normally track a disease outbreak?
Traditional public health surveillance is inherently passive and agonizingly slow. The WHO relies on a traditional approach that essentially requires waiting for the disaster to happen.
Waiting for it.
Yeah. A person has to get so sick that they cannot manage at home. They travel to a hospital, they get admitted, the doctor decides to order a test, the lab takes hours or days to process the test.
That is already a lot of time.
And it continues. The hospital administration reports the positive test to the local government. The local government eventually aggregates the data and sends it to the national government. The national government eventually reports it to the WHO.
It sounds like a game of telephone that takes weeks to complete.
You are always inherently 10 to 14 days behind the pathogen. By the time the WHO knows you have an outbreak, the bacteria has already multiplied exponentially and spread to the next major city.
The documents provided a specific, real-world example to illustrate this delay. The Campylobacter water outbreak in Aski, Norway. Let's dramatize what actually happened there in the traditional model. Paint the scene.
In Aski, a municipality in Norway, the public water reservoir became contaminated with Campylobacter, which is a particularly nasty bacteria that causes severe, debilitating gastrointestinal illness.
Not fun.
In the traditional surveillance model, the local authorities had absolutely no idea the water supply was poisoned. On day one, a few people felt nauseous. They assumed it was bad food, so they stayed home.
Makes sense.
On day two, more people felt sick. They stayed in bed, suffering in silence, assuming it would pass. The authorities remained completely blind.
So no one was telling the government.
Right. It wasn't until several days later when the illness became so severe that the emergency rooms suddenly flooded with profoundly dehydrated patients requiring 4V fluids that the alarm was finally raised.
By that point, thousands of people had been drinking contaminated water, brushing their teeth with it, and giving it to their children for nearly a week.
The authorities were fighting a fire that was already out of control.
Now replay that exact same scenario in a town equipped with a dense network of Prima kiosks. The timeline shifts dramatically.
So let's play the Prima simulation. Monday morning, the water reservoir becomes contaminated. By Tuesday morning, people start waking up feeling sick.
Okay.
But instead of suffering in silence at home or waiting until they are dehydrated enough for the ER, they walk down the street to the local Prima kiosk at the pharmacy to check their symptoms and get advice.
Because it is accessible and cheap.
Exactly. Within a matter of hours on Tuesday morning, a cluster of kiosks in one specific geographic radius starts logging a massive, highly anomalous surge in severe stomach issues.
We are talking down to the neighborhood or street level.
Down to the zip code.
Mhm.
The AI system recognizes the abnormal combinatorial pattern instantly. It doesn't wait for a lab test. It triggers the blue code.
The blue code.
A blue code is an immediate epidemic alert. The system automatically notifies the local health authorities, providing the geographic cluster, the symptom profile, and the demographic data, days before the first severe patient ever sets foot in an emergency room.
The authorities could receive that alert on Tuesday at noon, realize the common denominator is the local water grid, and issue a mass text message boil water advisory by Tuesday afternoon.
They could prevent thousands of subsequent infections.
It acts as a real-time smoke detector for disease.
It is the difference between fighting a fire when it is a smoldering wastebasket versus trying to fight it when the entire apartment building is engulfed in flames.
The technological theory is brilliant, but I kept coming back to the human element, specifically the economics of the local Maya advocate.
Let's look at the friction there.
The local operator makes their living collecting those 100 rupee fees for every person who uses the kiosk. If a blue code triggers and the AI determines there is a highly contagious outbreak, the protocol might require locking down the kiosk or telling contagious people to stay away to prevent a crowd from forming.
Right.
If the machine shuts down, the operator loses their daily income. Won't human nature kick in? What stops a desperate operator from just ignoring or overriding the blue alert to keep the line moving and keep collecting cash?
It is a vital question because technology always fails if the underlying economic incentives are broken. Dr. Srivatsa recognized this exact friction point, which is why he designed a specific economic mitigation framework.
What does he call it?
He refers to it as the fire alarm framework.
Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Consider a factory floor. If a factory worker loses a full day's pay every time they pull the fire alarm and shut down the assembly line, human psychology dictates that they will ignore the smell of smoke until their boots are literally melting.
They can't afford to be safe.
Exactly. You cannot financially penalize people for doing the right thing for public health. Therefore, the Dr. Maya Foundation structurally subsidizes the cost of compliance.
How do they afford to do that, and how does it work in practice?
When a blue code is legitimately triggered and validated by the network, the foundation steps in using the pooled funds collected from the global 50% revenue split.
Right.
They financially compensate the local advocate for the lost business during the lockdown period. They essentially reward the operator for triggering the alert and strictly following the containment protocols.
Wow. It completely aligns individual financial incentives with global public health safety.
It really does.
I see the logic, but my immediate thought is, won't people game this system? If I get paid for a lockdown, why wouldn't I just input fake symptoms into my own kiosk to trigger a blue code and get a paid vacation?
The system anticipates that. Because the AI relies on a vast combinatorial logic of voice analysis, symptom cross-referencing, and multi-kiosk clustering, a single operator cannot easily fake a localized epidemic.
How would it?
The AI would recognize that the voices all belong to the same person, or that the symptom progression doesn't match the biological reality of a pathogen. The audit trails are just too deep to easily manipulate.
It is outsmarting human greed.
The incentive structure makes doing the right thing the most profitable, stable choice.
It is a masterclass in systems design. It takes human psychology, microeconomics, and microbiology, and weaves them together into a single, cohesive defense mechanism.
And this brings the entire conversation back to you, the listener. Because while we have spent a lot of time talking about rural clinics in India or water supplies in Norway, this is fundamentally about protecting your own city.
Right, because of what we said earlier.
As we established in the beginning, a superbug does not respect borders. If a cluster of Prima kiosks in a remote village detects a novel, highly resistant respiratory pathogen and triggers a blue code, isolating the infected patients before they ever board a bus to the capital city and get on an international flight, that single kiosk just protected London, New York, and Tokyo.
It is the ultimate fusion of localized, grassroots empowerment and global planetary defense.
It proves that we do not have to view this as an either scenario. We don't have to choose between massive, top-down global frameworks like the Fleming Fund and grassroots initiatives.
We need both.
We absolutely need the international laboratories to sequence the genomes and develop new drugs, but we desperately need the prima kiosks to act as the global nervous system, feeling the pain and spotting the patterns the exact moment they happen.
Let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey we've been on today. We started with the cold, terrifying math. 39 million projected deaths from antimicrobial resistance.
Right.
We looked at the broken radar of empirical treatment, the reality that doctors are carpet bombing our microbiomes and breeding superbugs simply because the diagnostic testing is too slow and too expensive.
We explored the massive, slow-moving global bureaucracy of the One Health approach, highlighting the staggering reality that 73% of our global antibiotics are being dumped into livestock for economic growth.
And tracing how those superbugs end up in our soil and water. We examined the Herculean efforts of the Fleming Fund to build basic, functional lab infrastructure in the global south.
And then we followed the visionary pivot of Dr. Srivatsa. We moved away from the high-level policy papers and down to the dirt roads of local communities.
We saw how a standalone, solar-powered kiosk, operated by a local woman earning a dignified livelihood, could bypass the institutional hoarding of the medical industry.
It could teach true body literacy and act as a real-time, AI-driven epidemic defense network for the entire human race.
It is a remarkable testament to what becomes possible when we stop viewing patients merely as profit centers or data points and start designing systems that treat health and knowledge as fundamental human rights.
It truly is.
And so as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
What is that?
For the last century, we have essentially outsourced the understanding of our own bodies to vast, complex, highly bureaucratic institutions. We have allowed our health data, our treatments, and our peace of mind to be hoarded by a system that, quite frankly, often relies on our continued sickness and dependency to sustain its economic model.
If knowledge truly is free will, as Dr. Srivatsa claims in his philosophy of Dharma, we all have to ask ourselves a very personal question.
How body literate are you, really?
If the digital infrastructure of tomorrow, tools like the Dr. Maya AI, can grant you the synthesized wisdom of a 50-year veteran physician right in the palm of your hand or at a kiosk down the street, are you ready to stop being a passive consumer of your own healthcare?
Are you ready to step up and take responsibility for your own cosmic order? Because the fortress walls of modern medicine are visibly crumbling. The antibiotics, the magic bullets we have relied on, are failing.
And when the ammunition finally runs out, the only defense left will be our own wisdom.
It is a daunting responsibility to take on, but also an incredibly empowering one. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into antimicrobial resistance and the future of global health. Keep questioning the systems built around you, keep demanding better models, and remember to view your own health not just as a product to be managed by a corporation, but as your most fundamental human right. Until next time.